Welcome back. Let's jump into the actual editing process in Final Cut Pro by setting up our project. And it's entirely up to you if you want to sort of edit alongside me. You have your project, you're working on that, seeing what I'm doing, kind of going through the process together. Or if you just want to see how I do things and then apply that to your workflow later, whatever works for you is absolutely fine. This is also my final disclaimer that this is just my way of editing with Final Cut Pro. It's not necessarily the best way, and it's definitely not the only way, but it's the way that works for me, and it's a way that has worked really well for me for a number of years. If you want to just replicate everything that I'm doing, I hope that works really well for you, but also at the same time, if you want to modify this and cherry pick the things that work best for you and your workflow and what you're trying to do, that's the whole point, right? Is to take what I'm doing here and make it work for you with the projects that you're working on. So I hope that is clear. I won't make that disclaimer anymore. This is just my way of editing with Final Cut Pro. I'm excited about it, and I'm excited to share that with you. So let's jump into Final Cut Pro right now. Right here, I have just an empty blank Final Cut, kind of like we were looking at in the basics section, but I do have a project already finished. I have filmed and recorded a video. What I tried to do was pick a video that I would consider a standard video for me at this point, which is, in this case, it's a Final Cut Pro tutorial. So in this course about Final Cut Pro editing, I will be editing a video about Final Cut Pro, which is going to be interesting. But the video itself has a few interesting components. It has a main camera shot right here that I was recording on. It also has a secondary camera over there, a B camera that I was recording on. It has some B-roll clips that I'm going to be adding in, and then it also has a screen recording, and I thought that it was going to be really important to include a screen recording in this course because that is what a lot of people use Final Cut Pro for, especially if you make tutorials or anything like that. A lot of people rely on screen recordings, and I want to make sure that was clear in the workflow. So if I move Final Cut Pro to the side, over here on my desktop, you'll see a folder for a project and then a couple of images. The way that I handle my media, because that's a big thing immediately after filming your project, is you're going to want to figure out what to do with everything that you have just filmed. This computer that I'm using right here has a 2 terabyte internal drive. So what I do is I just keep my project files on this computer. And then when I'm done with that project, I move them and I archive them onto a server that we have. We will talk about that closer to the end when we're exporting and doing all that. But figuring out where you're going to store your media is very important. Internal computer storage is going to be the fastest because it's just the quickest, most reliable, but it's also then going to start taking up space on your computer. If you don't have space for that, you could use something like an external drive, an SSD, as long as it's fast enough that you can edit off of it and store footage on it without it causing problems for you or slowing down your program or your workflow. This works great too. It's a great way to expand the storage capability of an existing computer. If it's possible to use a Thunderbolt drive, that's even going to give you faster transfer speeds, and it's almost going to make it seem like this external drive is the same speed as your internal drive. So essentially, whatever's on my computer is just what I'm currently working on, and then it goes away. I have a folder here called 330 Motion VFX Tracking. That is episode number 330 for my YouTube channel, and Motion VFX Tracking is the title of the video. That's what the video is going to be about. If I open this folder, you'll see all the footage that I have for this project. I have a folder down here called Intros. This project is going to be about how I make little animated intro graphics, sort of, for my YouTube videos, and I took a bunch of examples and just put them in that folder. I have a few other like B-roll clips that I want to add in, and then if we look at file size, these larger files up here, 23 gigs, 23 gigs, 3 gigs, these are my main camera angles. So the main one is my main angle, the second one is the second angle, and then we have the screen recording. And all of those are going to be added in. So this is how my footage is there. It's not particularly super well organized, but I'm just a one-person team, so I know what all of these things mean. If you're working with somebody else, going through and labeling all these like A camera, B camera, scene one, take one, that is probably a more responsible thing to do. But if it's just me who filmed everything and now is editing everything, you know, I was there, I remember it. And I was already able to make the thumbnail for this video. If you do YouTube videos and you can ever do this, it's really helpful to make the thumbnail before you actually edit the video. It almost gives you like a context for the video that you're making, and it sort of helps you remember the framing and the tone and the purpose of the video as you're putting it together. I found that to be super helpful. So here was the original this was just a screenshot actually, and then when I turned it into a thumbnail, it ended up looking like that. It's always very hard to do thumbnails for non-physical things like software applications. So that was kind of the best I could do there. So now that we're ready to bring that footage into Final Cut Pro, in order to do that, it's really important that we keep things organized. And the way that you do that within Final Cut Pro is with libraries, events, and projects. Final Cut uses those terms in sort of a weird way, so don't let them be misnomers to what they actually are. A library is the biggest file structure that you can create within Final Cut Pro. So right now I will create a new library. I just went File, New Library, and I will call this one Intros because it's going to be for the intro project. When you create a new library, right away it's going to put in a smart collection and an event. A library is just a collection of everything, of different projects, different events worth of footage, all this stuff just in one location. An event is sort of like a specific folder of footage within that library, and a project goes inside an event, and that is the actual thing that has become edited with that footage. So whenever I create a new library, I always delete the smart collection. Maybe it's not a smart idea, but I've never used it. And then I usually rename the event to be whatever the video number is going to be, just so I know that that's what I'm working on. If I needed to do a new event, I could just do new event, and then I can title that, 331 in this case. And then I have a new event right here. So these events are all in this intros library. Since a lot of the work I do is for YouTube, a lot of times what I'll do is I will just have a monthly library. This is an older one, but this one says October library. So in the month of October, I will just create a library for October. All the events for projects that I work on in that month, I just keep in that library. And then at the end of the month, I delete that and then create the November library. And the reason I do that is because if you have one library for a long period of time, it does sort of start getting weird. It starts taking up extra space on your hard drive. It starts collecting just sort of virtual dust, and things can just get a little strange sometimes. So to keep everything running smoothly, I try to not let one library last for too long on my computer. And there's definitely nothing wrong with just creating a new library for every project either, if that's something you want to do. Now, when you create a new library, it does let you decide where you want to create that library. In this case, it was just my desktop for the project we're working on right now. But if you are working off of an external drive and the drive is fast enough, I definitely recommend creating your library on this drive. And that also means you can switch between computers. You could take this and plug it into another computer with Final Cut and then keep editing your project there, which is kind of a cool thing too. So your library should be kind of in the most optimal place based on your computer setup. And then to create a project, we will just go up to File, New Project, and in this case, I'll just it'll call it Intros. It doesn't matter if it's the same name as the library. Your project settings are where you can select the settings for your project. Your resolution is probably the most important one. In this case, this is going to be a normal 4K video, so I can just select the 4K option. That's 3840 by 2160. And 2398, 24 frames per second. But you could change this if you had something more specific. Keep rendering at ProRes 422. This is basically how Final Cut is going to interpret the color of your footage. And then everything else can stay the same. We're going to use stereo audio and 48,000 kilohertz audio. If you do want to do something different with your resolution, there are some built-in options for like vertical video. You can change the resolution there, or you can even go to custom and just type in whatever size you want. So if you wanted to work with different aspect ratios where the actual exported video file like is a different shape and a different aspect ratio, this is where you would type that in right there. So you have all kinds of flexibility with that. I'm going to go back to 4K, and I'm not messing with the time code or anything right now. And then I just click OK. And now this thing up here that says intros, this is my project that I can start working on. And this intro project is in this 330 event. And if I go to the 331 event, there's nothing there. And what that means is everything I'm going to do for this project is going to go in this 330 event folder, and I can create multiple projects. So if I wanted to do a short version and a long version, if I want to do a vertical version, I could create all these different project files in this event, and they would all just use that same footage. If I wanted to then work on a different project, I could put all that footage in here, and then it just helps to keep things organized because I don't have to worry about sifting through footage from multiple projects, and it gets really, really confusing. And all of those projects, all of these events would be in this one single library. So that's sort of how that hierarchy works within Final Cut Pro.